Now today I want to talk about facing your giants. It's easy to talk about giants as long as they're lumbering over someone else's landscape. But when you find them at your doorstep or discover that one has invaded your home, or even more dangerously come inside your head, you realize how intimidating a giant can be. They have several names, these giants of ours. There's a giant called fear. Even though most of us don't want to admit it, most of us entertain fears. Whatever may be your giant, let me tell you that I've learned over the years that giants work most effectively in valleys. When we have hit a valley, that's when the giant begins to march toward us and intimidates us the most. There's a giant that appears in the pages of the scriptures. In the 17th chapter of 1 Samuel, a story you have heard since you were a child in Sunday school. We read in verse 2 of 1 Samuel 17 that Saul and his men, the men of Israel, had gathered and camped in the valley of Elah. And what makes the valley intimidating is not the landscape. It is the presence of a champion. He's called that more than once in this chapter. In fact, the emphasis always falls on the externals when you deal with giants. In this case, we read that the Philistines stood on the mountain on one side and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, and the valley between them. Then a champion came out from the armies of the Philistines named Goliath. I know you know the story. I know you're familiar with where it's going, but I want to ask you for a few moments to put yourself in that valley and to imagine looking across the way and seeing this huge, imposing individual in full armor. We read that he was about 9 feet 7 inches tall. He says, choose a man for yourselves and let him come down. If he's able to fight with me and kill me, we will become your servants. And we read they were intimidated to the point, into verse 11, that they gave way to dismay and fear. See it? Greatly afraid. There he is for everyone to see. He's a warrior from his earliest years, and he is nobody to mess with. And Israel knew it, and all retreated to their tents. Now suddenly the text moves us about 10-15 miles due east to a little hamlet named Bethlehem. And there at Bethlehem there is a family. And the father, whose name is Jesse, says to this young man, David, I want you to take this to those who are in battle. And he gives him some supplies, some food. Verse 14 tells us that David was the youngest. Understand, David has never seen the battle. He's been keeping his father's sheep. And so he hears his father. He understands the responsibility, and so he runs the errand, and he comes on the scene, and he sees this situation for the first time. And he hears the voice of Goliath. David, who is unintimidated, fresh out of the field. He is a lover of God, and his heart is pure. Now listen to Saul. Saul said to David, "You're not able to do it." Isn't that encouraging? He says, "You're but a youth," and he's been a warrior from his youth. David said to Saul, "Your servant." Now listen to this. Only time you'll know about it. David says, "Oh no, you don't understand, King Saul. Back when I was keeping my dad's sheep, there was a lion and a bear that came and took a lamb from the flock, and I went out after him and attacked him. And he said, well, a lion come, and look at how he puts it. He said, I went after him and attacked him and rescued it. That's the lamb from his mouth. And when he rose up against me, I seized him by the beard and struck him and killed him. No one ever would have known it if it hadn't been for that verse of Scripture. And he says, your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This